So our next speaker is Weber-Wilk. Kevin is the head and attending veterinarian of the Central Animal Facility of the University of Bern. His role encompasses animal facility management, research communication, training, health monitoring, and veterinary pharmacy management. He oversees PIRAT, which is the University of Bern's animal management system. So today he will present his talk on multidimensional refinement of rat breeding. And we have a pre-recorded video from him.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to my presentation titled Multidimensional Refinement of Rat Breeding at the Central Animal Facilities. Unfortunately, I fell sick shortly prior to this meeting, so I was not sure if I would be able to present live, which is why I pre-recorded this presentation. So unfortunately, I will probably not be available for questions during the live course, but my colleagues from the Experimental Animal Center will be sure to answer any questions you might have about the rat breeding after this recording. So to get started, I would like to give you a quick overview over what this rat breeding is and why we're even conducting it. So we have at the Central Animal Facilities, we have a small Wistar colony. We have a constant stock of around 25 to 30 animals in total, so relatively small. And the breeding stocks are replenished mostly from our surplus offspring. From time to time, we will introduce commercially bought Wistar from Janvier to refresh the breeding, but most of our breeding stock comes from our own surplus offspring. So now, what does this mean essentially? Because the Wistar, as you might know or will know, are an outbred strain. So the question is, are our internal breeders even still real Wistar? And while we avoid direct inbreeding between parents and offspring or direct siblings, we have a colony that's way too small to really maintain a true outbred status as you would need to keep this status. This means that we have created basically some kind of inbred substrain of the Wistar that we like to call the Bernese Wistar. So it's not entirely comparable to a commercially available Wistar, but relatively close still. And so the reason for our breeding is that we have mainly one research group that has highly specific research requirements. They need between 8 and 12 pups per week. They have a required collection day either on Monday or on Tuesday, and the age of the pups at the collection can only be around 24 hours, at maximum 48 hours, which means that the required time of birth needs to be quite precise, somewhere between Sunday morning or in the night between Saturday to Sunday until Monday. So it's a quite narrow birthing window, essentially. And this means that ordering pups or pregnant females that will give birth this precisely is not really feasible for this group. And so we started back in, I think before 2018, it already started that we had a breeding program specifically for this group. And back then, essentially to maximize the chance of hitting this breeding window, we had a very large amount of surplus animals being produced. This came from the fact that we had mating of up to 4 breeding pairs per week, basically hoping for the best that one of the breeding events would fit in this time frame. And there were no, or at least as far as I know, there were no early indicators for pregnancy being checked. I'm saying as far as I know because I only joined the Central Animal Facilities in 2020, when a lot of the reforms I'm going to talk about today were already put in place. So as far as I know, no early indicators for pregnancy were checked at the time. and a high number of surplus pups was produced yes, as I said, to fulfill these very specific research requirements, essentially. And this is why we decided, or it was decided, that a breeding reform to this process was direly needed. And so here is an overview over the new process that has been in place since, I think, late 2019. Essentially, around 4 weeks before the estimated or desired birthing time point, we have a planning phase. The animals to be bred are selected, as I said, at least 4 weeks in advance. Usually it's even earlier than this. And the breeding requirements for these animals are that they need to be between 10 and 20 weeks old at the time of breeding and not directly related. Females are being used for up to 2 pregnancies and are then retired to avoid too big litters being produced. And then in what I called week 0, so when we mate or when we start the breeding setup on a Friday, the selected male and female are being placed together in a breeding cage in a 1-to-1 breeding setup. They're being and the baseline weight of the female is taken. After 1 week, the male is removed from the breeding cage. It's being replaced by a companion female that's intended to keep company to the pregnant female, or hopefully pregnant female. And we take the weight again on Friday and give a first prognosis regarding the pregnancy status based on the weight gain or lack thereof. Again, 1 week later, on Friday, we have the pregnancy monitoring. So the weight of the hopefully pregnant breeding female is checked again. And at this point, based on the weight, we can give a quite accurate prognosis already regarding whether or not the female is actually pregnant. And we communicate this prognosis to the researchers at this point. And 1 week later, on Tuesday, the companion female is removed, and the pregnant female is kept in single housing until the date of the birth. And at this point, the last weight check is being performed to avoid disturbing the female in the last days before giving birth. On the Friday of week 3, there's the last checkup. It's just a visual checkup from the outside of the cage. As I said, there's no weight check at this point to avoid disturbing the female in the last days. And then in week 4, at day 24, so this is basically 21 days after the expected copulation date, essentially, or pregnancy date. So 21 days for the pregnancy plus 3 days for the breeding to get started after placing the male in the breeding cage. So around day 24, we expect the pups to be born. And since we start the mating on a Friday, usually the birthing event happens around Sunday and Monday. Sometimes we have outliers with the females giving birth already on Saturday. Sometimes they're a bit late and give birth on Tuesday, sometimes even on Wednesday. But the high majority of females give birth in this required time window. And so now the question is, of course, how does this relate to the topic of the day, and how does this relate to the implementation of the 3 Rs? I think one is fairly obvious. We have a big component of reduction. Through this timed breeding, we were able to reduce the setup breeding pairs from 4 per week prior to 2019 to 3 per week in 2019 to 2 per week in 2020. And now we're down to even only 1 per week from 2022 onward. This means that we also reduced the animals that we have in the breeding stock in the rotation, as we have less requirement for breeders being present, which means that we were able to reduce from over or up to 200 breeders per year to currently 56 breeders in 2024. So this includes the breeders that will be used until the end of 2024. So we will require 56 breeding animals for the whole year of 2024. And most notably, we have a reduction of surplus pups from nearly 2,500 surplus pups produced per year prior to 2019 down to 230 surplus pups in 2024. So here I must note that these 230 pups that are listed here are really just surplus pups that need to be euthanized and that we don't find any different use for. It's not the number of pups that we produce, of course. So, for example, in 2023, we have produced 709 pups. 335 were used, so roughly half of them were used for this group that I mentioned before, for the experiments. 53 were given to other groups for other experiments, so we were able to reuse these pups for other experimental purposes. 56, as I mentioned, were used to replenish our breeding stock, and this leads to the remaining 230 surplus pups that we couldn't place, essentially. But as you can see, this is essentially down 90% within 5 years. So instead of producing around 2,500 surplus pups per year, we're now at a little over 200. And a quite recent addition from 2024, we are now rehoming our retired Vista breeders. They qualify quite well for the rehoming programs, and we have received very good feedback also from the rehoming organization regarding the quality of the animals, in the sense that they're already well used to being handled. They're quite comfortable around humans, and they're easy to place and get along with other rats quite well. So this was a very nice feedback for us, and it was also a good step in regards of compassion fatigue for our animal caretakers that are understandably quite attached to these rats, as they essentially breed them and accompany them for their whole lifetime. And so knowing that they can be placed in rehoming, even if it's only a quite small number of animals in the grand scheme, I think helps also the animal caretakers to cope with the whole process, and knowing that some of these animals will have to be euthanized, of course. So the second R that we address with this refinement reform program is the refinement, of course. We have implemented different measures that make it a lot easier on the animal, the whole procedure a lot easier on the animal. So we have implemented a lot of gentle handling, meaning that the animals are quite used to being handled. They're quite docile and have a good partnership with the animal caretakers in charge. As you can see from these pictures, there's absolutely no hesitation for them to go on the hand of the handling animal caretaker. We have used a lot of positive reinforcement. For example, we have trained the animals to change from the cages, or to change in a new cage during cage change practice without the need of being transferred manually. So basically the animals have been given treats in the new cage and have switched the cages on their own. We did the same for the weight monitoring to have them move in the scale and get them used to the scale. So they move to the scale pretty much voluntarily. And we have implemented this non-invasive weight-based pregnancy monitoring to, first of all, make the process easy on the rats and still have a quite good estimate of whether or not the rat is pregnant. And I must say this is quite reliable. So usually we see in pregnant animals weight gains. Of course, they vary from one animal to the other. They're based on also their starting weight. But in general, the animals are so that we see weight gains from between 50 and 100 grams per week if the animal is pregnant. And we've also implemented a playpen, meaning that we have arranged for a relatively big play cage with a changing enrichment inside that the animals are being placed into. So as a unit from the cage, essentially, and the pups are also placed in this playpen from as early as 2 weeks of age, together with their mothers. So they're used to this playpen from very early on, and the rats enjoy it a lot. And so now, to give you a somewhat better impression, I have a few videos ready. So this is from, I think, late 2019, early 2020, when we started the positive reinforcement. As you can see, we have treats here. So back then, we still placed the rats by hand in the scale for the weighing, and you can see the rat just stays there and basically waits for the weighing to end. It doesn't try to escape. There's no need to restrain it. And then the whole procedure is, yes, quite easy on the animal. Yes, and here also during the cage change, we placed treats in the new cage. And here you can see a group of young rats during the cage change procedure. As you can see, they switch cages on their own quite fast as well. They're not stressed at all during this procedure. Everything works quite smoothly. And here we have a rat again being weighed. So this is, I think, in 2021, 2022, around this time, with the rat having climbed on its own. So unfortunately, the video starts a bit afterwards, but it climbed in the scale on its own, stayed there, and then climbs back into the cage. And to finish off, I have a short video of the playpen I mentioned. So as you can see here, this is a group of 6 relatively young rats. They were just weaned shortly before. So I think one or 2 weeks before this time. And as you can see, the layout of this playpen allows them to climb, allows them to play with a water basin, for example. There is a labyrinth with tunnels, and this layout is changed on a very regular basis by our leading rat animal caretaker, who takes care of this quite well and makes sure that the rats have a lot to play with, a lot of new experiences to pass their time with, and the rats really like it a lot. Yes. And with this, I've reached the end of my presentation. There are 2 special thanks I would like to extend. First of all, to Carlotta De Toto, which was the former head of the Central Animal Facility, and who essentially started this whole reform process. As I mentioned, when I joined in 2020, a lot of this was already implemented, and we then essentially just went on refining these general ideas that had already been implemented. So this whole reform started with Carlotta, and also Rilana Lüthi, which is our animal caretaker and our main responsible for the rats and the rat breeding since around 2021, who's doing a fantastic job with the rat breeding and also with caring for the rats and making sure that everything works as intended and in the best interest of the animals. And with this, I've reached the end of the presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. I thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. if in case there are some questions that maybe my colleagues are not able to answer, I will make sure to double check if there has been anything submitted and maybe answer them via email afterwards. Or maybe if I'm well enough, let's see, I might be in the chat and be able to answer as well. So feel free to ask your questions. And otherwise, as I said, thank you for your attention and enjoy the rest of the presentations.
Okay, so thank you, Kevin. I guess he's not around, but I think it was a nice program showing that this time breeding and the whole from breeding to the playpen, what can we provide to the rats? And I think there's a question, I also have a similar question, whether could we do this also for mice, for black 6, for example, shall the time breeding, maybe the voluntary cage change the weighing, could this be implemented also in mice, wild type mice, for example?
I just want to say that for the rat, we tried only for the rats because it's quite time consuming. Now everything is really well organized, and I would say also the rats know it. So our success rate increased over time. I think in a busy mice facility, this would be a lot of work, but I think it's absolutely possible. You need to be very structured and very organized, and you need to plan a lot on paper, and then have obviously a good team of animal caretaker who are also very structured and follow exactly the timelines.
Okay, so there would be no major issues switching to mice then?
No.
Besides logistics or number of animals and things like this. Then Eve asked a question, could you shorten the breeding period? I guess it's what the coupling period.
Yes, I understand. No, it doesn't
Yes.
work. The 3 days, I mean, we have also, first of all, when you do the breedings, you also have sometimes some, let's say, males that do not mate. And I don't know if, you know, one says that Bernese people are slow, so perhaps these are Bernese strains, so they are a little bit slow and they need that time. Otherwise, they don't get the success rate is too random.
Okay, so these 3 days is what you figured it out that it would be enough for a good successful rate.
We tried even shorter, but then it's too risky that they are not pregnant.
Okay,